I want more than just a piece. Wanna be heard from the west to the east. I worked in my craft and I prayed for my time on the scene. The man have never left my team. 19, learned the right creed. Nah, I'm not a right breed, but I might be. In my crease, Nikes, hit up my G. I'll still never sell out my theme. Well, you know about heritage, you go inherited. Don't chill with the snakes, but the flow's still venomous. Perspective is everything. So much lemonade, I don't know what a lemon is.
Okay, so we have a new episode for you this week. Thank you so much if you're listening to this podcast or if you're watching. We really are grateful. It's a different type of episode today, and I guess we decide as a team ever so often that we want to do these sort of episodes, so you don't get too too familiar with the sort of interview style and discussion we do. They're very important. They're great episodes, but we thought this is a nice comma because this podcast really isn't just for people who want to listen to interviews. It's really for folks who are intellectually curious, and we know that you, the listener or the person watching this, are someone who is intellectually curious. You like, taking stones, looking under them, and so ever so often we want to do an episode like this where we can speak directly to you, but also consider, a topic and an issue, something happening around the world, give you lots of data, give you a chance to kind of understand what's going on and to make an informed sort of decision about things. So today we want to cover the fact that in the next 3 years, really, our whole lives will change. And sure, there's a bit of melodrama in that, but it is true because in the next 3 years we're going to have an election in the US. So one of the biggest economies, democracies in the world will have an election, and there'll be a new president. In the UK, equally, within the next 3 years, we'll have a new prime minister. And also in Nigeria, which is the largest democracy in Africa, in many ways, I think the most significant country. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm Nigerian. There will be an election there as well for a new president. And so these three different, large economies, large democracies, there's going to be a new election. And we want to just cover how the countries might look, right, after these elections, but also, are the elections even safe? What's going to happen with them? And what will the world look like in 3 years when we've got new leaders of all these different countries? But of course, first, like I said at the start, I have to just say thank you. I don't care how well-meaning you are. I think everyone who makes content will admit that there's always a sort of temptation to do things that will get you quote-unquote views. And we've resisted that temptation so far. But what makes it easier to resist that temptation is when people like you listening, watching, actually engage with us, right? Every time you like the video, you comment, you subscribe, all these things, it really helps us know that we're going in the right direction. And it's so rewarding, like when we see content we make that's meaningful actually start conversations and debate rather than some random argument, on the air. Guys, I have to tell you, I was so happy the fact that I think 2 episodes ago, the conversation we had with Rory Sutherland had people in the comment section of TikTok debating taxation policy. That's like a high moment in my life. I was like, this is amazing. This is the kind of stuff that would get me on TikTok. The dances are cool, but it's nice to see that happen. I think the video has nearly 1 million views and thousands of comments of people talking about tax, which is just fascinating. But anyways, we are committed on this podcast to meaningful content. So I'm hoping moving forward, we can keep making these sort of episodes and these sort of shows. So thank you so much for your support so far, and please just keep supporting us so we will only get better. Quick aside, this is like the most consistent we've ever been, which is just so refreshing, right, to see an episode out weekly. So let's start with the UK. The UK is in a very, very interesting position. We've had a conservative government now for a very, very long time. And the big question really is, in this next election, which is only technically it should be 2 years away, but of course the prime minister does have the power to call an election at any time. What's going to happen essentially when we have this next election? We will finally have a different party take over, or will it be the Conservative Party again? Now, the next general election must be no later than January 2025. I believe it's the 24th of January 2025. And essentially that election will determine what the composition of the UK Parliament is. It is very important for people to know, because we watch a lot of US politics. Sometimes we can think we have a presidential system here where you're voting on whether Keir Starmer is great or not. But of course you're not. Really, in the UK, we have 650 smaller races happening in different constituencies. And those constituencies make up the MPs, and then the party that has the most MPs ends up being the governing party. That's really how it works here. And I feel like we always have to remind ourselves of that, because we get very, very excited when we see Keir Starmer with 40 points in the election polls, or Rishi Sunak with whatever points. That's not quite how it works here in the UK. But I've been doing a lot of research around this, like what's going to happen, how will things look? And so far, based on pretty much most polls, if not every poll, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have a massive lead in the polls. Now, it's important to contextualize that lead, because there's a number of things going on. One, it's fatigue from the incumbent. We've had the Conservative Party for a long time, so naturally people are tired. There's been a number of things that have happened in the Conservative Party, which I won't remind everyone here, that's made them, it's knocked some of the shine, let's say, of that party. It's now, again, almost regained its brand as the party of sleaze, and people are sort of tired of all the Boris stuff, Partygate, Liz Truss almost crashing our economy. A number of things have happened. And so I'm not sure if the support you see for Keir Starmer is a support for Keir Starmer or really disdain for the Conservative Party. But anyways, so far, politics.co.uk has Labour on 47.7%. if the election was held today. The Conservative Party they have on 26.6%, and they have the Liberal Democrats at 8.2%. So that means if there was a general election held today, Labour would have 365 seats of the 650. That means they would have gained 163 seats. The Conservative Party would have 183, which means that historic win they had, they would have lost 182 seats, and the Lib Dems will gain 22 seats. So under current polling, Labour is set to do very, very well in even some safe Conservative seats. I'm talking here about Weston-super-Mare, Bromley, Chislehurst. These are places there where former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been an MP, where Grant Shapps has been an MP, where even Jeremy Hunt has been an MP.
Hey there, just want to say thank you for listening or for watching this podcast. We have a great desire to grow this podcast, and one of the ways we're going to do that is if you listening follow, or if you are watching, you subscribe to the podcast. The faster it grows, the more guests we can get, but also the better the podcast gets. So please, just do me a favor, hit the subscribe button or the follow button. Back to the episode.
All these places are set to be contested if Labour maintain this polling lead. Now, this is obviously very exciting for folks in the Labour Party. They might be in government again. There was a lot of talk about them having a minority government, which means them not having enough to command a majority. So them having to maybe do a deal like we kind of saw with the coalition government whenever that was. Essentially, polling shows that they may actually get a majority government, and so Labour may be in charge. Now, This is made doubly interesting by a number of things that's happened, as you may have seen in recent days. One is Nicola Sturgeon, who's become the face of the SNP, the face of separatism, really, Scottish independence, stepped down. And so now the Labour Party in Scotland look like they might be doing well again. There's some polling data showing that they're moving in the right direction there as well. And so if Labour was to also win some kind of Scottish seats back, it would be a crazy result for Labour. But essentially, it looks like Keir Starmer may actually be able to command a majority in the next election. And this will change quite a bit, because if Labour win, in Scotland, and the First Minister there is a Labour minister, and Keir Starmer in England and really everywhere else is also the leader, then you're going to have just a national picture that has Labour in front. Now, where I get kind of a bit annoyed with Labour is, even with all this electoral success and the polling data that shows they're moving in the right direction, I still don't have a compelling vision from Keir Starmer about where he hopes to take Labour, where he hopes to take the country. I still don't quite get it. It feels like business as usual. And of course, after everything we've seen, not least with the pandemic, but also the cost of living crisis, with the war in Ukraine, you think now is the time for a transformational message that gets everyone going? I don't know. I'm still yet to hear that from Keir Starmer. So we'll see what happens there. But it seems as though, anyways, it's really Keir Starmer's election to lose. If for some reason it comes out that he's murdered someone or something, then maybe the polling numbers might change. But for now, there's very little Keir Starmer. I mean, I don't know what he could do to kind of to ruin this, but let's just keep watching that. Now, it's a different picture in the USA because, of course, the USA has, I guess the equivalent of the Labour Party, you could say, in power right now, at least in the presidency. Joe Biden's the current president. I'm sure we all know that. I hope you do. And what's funny about Joe Biden is, if his State of the Union address was anything to go by, it looks like Joe Biden might actually run again. Despite 62% of Democrats saying they don't want him to run, I think he's going to run again. And the way we know he's going to run again, because he used this State of the Union address to kind of talk about what his legislative program for the future would be. And, he was kind of boasting about all the stuff he's achieved, talking about his plans for the future. It didn't sound like someone who was cooling down, right? And so most people, a lot of commentators, expect him in the next few months or so to announce that he's going to be running again. Because again, the US elections, that's only 2 years away. So in his speech, which I took a look at again, he spoke about, of course, the infrastructure bill, which he passed. And in many ways, it is a landmark bill. He managed to get everyone to agree to kind of commit to rebuilding America's crumbling infrastructure, bridges, roads, so on and so forth. He spoke about his sort of new clean energy mandate and how he wanted to kind of wean America away from China and dependence on China. And then, of course, the midterm elections in America, which is normally a precursor for what happens in the national elections, in the presidential elections, showed Democrats gaining seats, right? They didn't lose as badly as they thought they would lose. And so a lot of people are sort of, wondering, is this why essentially Joe Biden feels confident? Of course it probably is, but here's the odd picture. Even though he's got all these wins happening, right, and all these different things going in his favor, the polling data in terms of how he would do against, say, a Trump, who's almost certainly going to run again, it's not that favorable. In fact, one poll, right, said that if there was a rematch against Trump and Biden today, Trump would get 48%, and Biden would get 45%. Now, if you're a pollster, that you'd say that's within the margin of error, which means it's too narrow, really, a gap to say that this is a win for Trump. It's like that's within the margin of error. But still, it's like, with all these wins, you really would expect Joe Biden to be way ahead of Donald Trump or any other person who would stand against him. So it's kind of given a mixed picture, if you like. There's wins and electoral wins on one side, but also people there really is no appetite for him. But the issue with the Democratic Party is there's no alternative. There really isn't someone forthcoming that people think, hey, this person could take over from Biden. This is the next person. I think initially, people thought Kamala Harris might take over, but of course she's doing even worse in the polling. So it's just really hard to tell what the picture will be like. And of course, as America's sort of younger brother, we always hope that whatever happens there will kind of lay the groundwork for what happens in the UK. So of course those on the left are hoping for a win for the Democrats, but again, we'll have to watch that one because it seems very fraught right now. The picture isn't very clear. And let's consider, I suppose, somewhere else where really the picture isn't very clear. That is, of course, in Nigeria. Nigeria. I'm Nigerian, right? I'm British, but I'm also Nigerian. Nigeria is super interesting because there's this crazy race. Now the race in Nigeria isn't 2 years away. It's imminent. February the 25th, if I'm correct. We're going to have a presidential election in Nigeria, and this is going to be big. Nigeria's had this big problem for a while, and I call it a problem because I think it is a problem. And I think the current presidency is probably emblematic of it. You've got Buhari, he's 80 years old. The average age in Nigeria is 18.1, but let's just say 18 years old. So you've got this average age, this young populous nation with bright-eyed, very, optimistic, future-looking young people. But then you're led by this really old man. And by the way, the average age of leaders over the past few years has been 88. So it's very, very old. But on top of that, you've got this patronage system where you're kind of expected to kiss the ring, wait your turn, and then slowly over time, you'll get to it. And so in this new election we have going on, the youngest person who's making any inroads is 67, I think. How old is Pete? I don't know if Pete Obi. I think he's 60. Let's see. I don't have his age down, but I think he's in his 60s. That's the youngest person. Everyone else is 72, 79. I mean... But anyways, away from that issue, what's getting people excited about this kind of Nigerian elections is the fact that you might actually have young people playing a really pivotal part in who gets to be the president, at least in the first vote, and we'll see how it goes after that. But essentially, the Nigerian elections will be held on the 25th of February 2023, and you've got two positions essentially being filled, the president and the vice presidency. Those are sort of the most important positions. And then you have the Senate and the House of Representatives as well. Now, Muhammad Buhari, he can't run again because he's been timed out. There's a limit system in the Nigerian Nigerian politics, so he can't go again. But this is very significant for a number of different reasons. I mentioned right at the start that Nigeria is Africa's biggest democracy. In many ways, Nigeria is always a litmus test for what's happening in the surrounding regions. And there's basically technically four people, but we'll stick to three right now, who are seen as kind of credible and could be successful competitors. One is Pete Obi, who is from the Labour Party, really tiny party, but essentially he's leading in the polls. Then you've got kind of more established candidates like Atiku, from the Democratic Party, and then you have Tinubu, who's from All Progressive Congress, I believe. Now, like I said, Pete Obi, who is this kind of it's odd in the Nigerian system, like a fresh young blood, not really.
Hey there, just want to say thank you for listening or for watching this podcast. We have a great desire to grow this podcast, and one of the ways we're going to do that is if you listening follow, or if you are watching, you subscribe to the podcast. The faster it grows, the more guests we can get, but also the better the podcast gets. So please, just do me a favor, hit the subscribe button or the follow button. Back to the episode.
But essentially, he's doing really well, like I said, and he's 61, by the way. But the really funny thing about supporters of POB is they're called obedience, which I find so funny. But of course, he's not new to the game. He was a former governor of Anambra State, so he's not he's not an outsider. He's known to the system, but he's young. He's very different, similar to Obama in 2007. Using social media, he's launched a really credible social media campaign. He's seen as very accessible. There's videos of him queuing up for a plane. He talks to people openly. There's a real sort of hope, if you like, that people have that this man isn't so far removed from them as, say, Muhammad Buhari was, who just didn't seem to understand young people at all, not least because of what we saw with NSARS and how he handled that whole situation. Remember when he banned everyone from using Twitter for a bit? I mean, just really, it doesn't understand young people. But essentially, here's what's interesting about the polling data. So Obi, in one kind of national poll, was leading by 21% when it came to registered voters. 13% said they would vote for Tinubu. and 10% said they would vote for Atiku. So this is an 8-point lead, which is significant when you consider the fact that it's a three-way split essentially. But of course, it's actually not enough for him to get over. To win the presidency in the first round, you need at least over 25% of the votes in at least 24 of the 36 states in Nigeria. And if you don't get that, then the vote goes to a second round where the top two candidates will compete again based on those terms. So this lead is quite interesting because a lot of incumbents are, they're a bit worried, like what's going on here. But of course, it's only a small number of people, undecided voters, and those who don't want you to know who their preferred candidates would be. They still account for a 23% split of the voting populace. And so, 23% and 30% respectively. So there's still a lot of people who are yet to indicate where they would vote, and obviously a lot of people who are still undecided. And so it's really, really hard to say that he's going to win, even though right now he's clearly ahead in the polls. Now, even if he does, just before the election, maybe like a week before, which is always a good time to kind of do a litmus test of where people are going to vote or voting intention. Even if he does get good numbers, then there's still a bit of an issue because Nigeria's democratic kind of system, whilst it's made wild improvements, right, from the Global Center for Democracy and lots of other agencies that monitor these things, massive improvements since 2011, there are still some significant challenges that makes it hard for us to say emphatically what's going to happen, right? Because in 2019, a committee was set up by the Nigerian army to basically investigate allegations of violence and killings against officers during the elections. This committee was given 2 weeks to basically publish its findings. It's been 4 years, and there's literally no findings published. There's no recommendations published. There's no evidence of any work that this committee has done. So you ask yourself, hold on a minute, all the issues we had in the last election, what's happening? Well, as of right now, there's been nothing said about it. In the last elections, we had 18 people across 7 states who were announced for prosecution. There was snatching of ballot boxes, destroying of election materials, disorderly conduct, unlawful possession of ballot papers and permanent voter kind of cards. Vote buy-in was rampant. This is when people literally, as you know, if you've got a population of people, youth unemployment is at an all-time high right now, right? So you've got people who are hungry, who are, can't afford, most things. And you're standing outside an election booth and someone just says, listen, here's whatever, a bit of money in front of you, vote this way. You're going to vote that way. So vote buy-in remains a significant threat to the election. So essentially, all these different features almost have to be controlled for in order to actually get to a situation where P or B could actually win. But in any case, as you can see, young people really can no longer be ignored. So even the old patronage system and the powers that be that have ruled that country for such a long time, it's only a matter of time before this growing group of young people really make their voices heard. And that's what's quite exciting about Nigeria right now is it's a young democracy, but it feels like the young finally are having their say and can no longer be ignored. So it's going to be a fascinating election to watch, not least because of all these different things we've mentioned so far, but because this might be the first election where things remarkably actually change in Nigeria. There's been talks for years of just lowering that age. And of course, a young president doesn't mean they're going to represent the interests of the people. But you have to realize a country where the president is 80 and the average age is 18, it's just far too wide. And so I'll be watching that very closely, and I hope you will as well. The reason why I thought I'd cover this in detail is just to give you a sense, I guess, of just all the things at play here over the next 2 or 3 years. The truth is, just like COVID changed the whole world and the war in Ukraine, at least in Europe, really affected, really globally affected how, how we live our lives. the next 3 years, these presidential elections and prime minister elections and general elections will really change how America, the USA, and Nigeria actually operate. And that in turn changes our world as we know it, right? At least our world as I experience it, but also as many of our people, many of you watching and listening experience as well. Now, what do I want to get from you? I want to know what you think, right? You know, who's going to win these elections? Who's going to be president? Who's going to be prime minister? I would love to know what you think in your comment sections. Do you agree? In the comment section, rather. You might not agree with my analysis. I want to hear it. I would love to see what you think as well. And of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please do subscribe, become a member, and I'll see you in the next one.
I want more than just a piece. Wanna be heard from the west to the east. I worked in my craft and I prayed for my time on the scene. The man have never left my team. 19, learned the right creed. Nah, I'm not a right breed, but I might be. In my crease, Nikes, hit up my G. I'll still never sell out my theme. Well, you know about heritage, you go inherited. Don't chill with the snakes, but the flow's still venomous. Perspective is everything, so much lemonade, I don't know what a lemon is.